Never again needs to be our slogan. Never again will we allow a president and a vice president to take a national disaster and turn it into a political and financial windfall. We have to be very careful. Just check this out. I think you'll find it fascinating. Ding the bell, leave your comments, subscribe to our channel, and share the story of our channel with your friends. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's 9/11, the 18th anniversary of 9/11. So I'm guessing you remember it if you're more than 25 years old, more or less. And if you're younger than that, you may not. But it was a big deal. And what was, in my opinion, a particularly big deal about it was the way that George W. Bush exploited it. You'll recall back in well, if you're young, you may not recall, but maybe you've read the histories. Back in 1998, there was this group called the Project for a New American Century. Jeb Bush was part of this. And the Project for among others. And the Project for a New American Century published this document saying that the big thing that we needed to do was invade Iraq. Now, Iraq, as Dick Cheney famously said, had the second largest oil reserves in the world. And most of them were untapped, so it was virgin oil. It was oil, I mean, you know, Saudi Arabia's oil is starting to get expensive. They're having to inject water into their wells. They're sucking, you know, on the straw really, really hard because they're about half empty. They're about half depleted. You know, we've been pumping oil out of Saudi Arabia since the 1920s. And but Iraq's oil, much of Iraq's oil had literally, they'd never even drilled into these giant pools of oil. So, you know, fresh oil, virgin oil, new oil fields, when you drill into them, you get geysers. I mean, the oil comes out under pressure. And so it's really, really cheap to pump. I mean, you know, $2, $3, $5 a barrel at the most. And then you can sell it for $50, $100, you know, whatever the spot price of oil is in the world. Whereas in Saudi Arabia, it's costing them $30, $40, $50 a barrel to suck this, you know, depending on the oil fields and, you know, a whole bunch of other variables, but it's costing them a whole lot more money. So Saudi oil is getting more expensive. A lot of American oil is getting more expensive. Fracking is expensive. But Iraqi oil, really, really cheap. Very, very profitable. So the Project for a New American Century said, let's invade Iraq and take their oil. But the Project for a New American Century said, we will need as Valerie Plame said on this program just 1 hour ago right now, we will need a Pearl Harbor-style event, an attack on America, in order to galvanize American public opinion in a way that they would support going to war with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And, of course, that happened on 9/11. This is not to say that the Project for a New American Century caused that to happen. I'm quite confident that it was Osama bin Laden and his merry band who caused that to happen. But nonetheless, that's, you know, that happened. And here we are. And so the way that this was exploited is just breathtaking. George W. Bush, and if you want to bring up the 360 here, Sean, I'm going to play this again. Cindy Sheehan testified about this before the U.S. House of Representatives. This was John Conyers held a hearing on this on 9/11. And Cindy tells the story. Cindy Sheehan, the mother of the Gold Star mother of a son who died in Iraq, tells this story.
As a matter of fact, in interviews in 1999 with respected journalists and longtime Bush family friend Mickey Herskowitz, then Governor George Bush stated, "One of the keys to being seen as a great leader is to be seen as commander-in-chief. My father had all this political capital built up when he drove the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and he wasted it. If I have a chance to invade, if I had that much capital, I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to get everything passed that I want to get passed, and I'm going to have a successful presidency," end quote.
Right, and what he wanted to get passed was privatizing Social Security. And right after after he won the election in 2004, right after he got re-inaugurated in 2005, he went on a road show, traveling all around the country, pitching, you know, privatizing Social Security. He famously gave a speech in which he said, "I've got political capital now from this, you know, from winning re-election, and I'm going to use it to privatize Social Security." That was his thing. And all these people in Iraq, hundreds of thousands of people, died because Bush lied us into this war. And Dick Cheney lied us into this war, and they cherry-picked intelligence, and they force-fed intelligence. Dick Cheney was running back and forth between the White House and CIA headquarters constantly. Richard Clark, you know, I mean, we've all heard these stories. That these two men not only committed war crimes in both the war with Afghanistan and the war with Iraq. The war with Afghanistan was equally unnecessary. Mullah Omar, the head of the Taliban, offered to arrest Osama bin Laden and turn him over to a third country for trial. And George Bush said, no, we'd rather have a war. He always wanted a war. And Cheney wanted a war. That, you know, Halliburton was a failing company. It was on the verge of bankruptcy when Dick Cheney became vice president. Because a couple of years earlier, I think a year and a half earlier, Dick Cheney had Halliburton. He was CEO of Halliburton, and he had the company acquire Dresser Industries, thinking that Dresser Industries had used to sell asbestos. And Cheney was assuming that Congress was going to pass this giant piece of legislation to take on the responsibility of reimbursing people like my father, you know, of making them whole, at least financially, their families, for those people who got mesothelioma from asbestos. And Congress hadn't done that, and Halliburton was on the verge of bankruptcy when Cheney became vice president. And so, boom, you got a war in Afghanistan first, and then a war in Iraq, and what happens? Halliburton starts literally getting phone calls from Washington, D.C. saying, we'd like to give you billions of dollars. They weren't even asking for it. That's what a no-bid contract is. You don't submit a bid. You don't ask for the work. You just sit there and answer the phone, and the government calls up and says, hey, we want to give you money. And Cheney's a rich man now. His daughter's in Congress. And Halliburton is, you know, huge as a result of these two wars.